You are looking at your screen right now, and you have a list in front of you. Maybe it's a spreadsheet, maybe it's a banking app, or maybe it's just a mental list that keeps you awake at 2 a.m. You have a credit card balance, you have a car loan. Maybe you have student loans, a medical bill, or a personal loan you took out to cover an emergency last year. You have a limited amount of extra money left over at the end of the month, and you are trying to answer one specific question. Where should this money go first? If you type that question into a search engine, you're going to get two rigid answers. The math experts will tell you to pay off the debt with the highest interest rate because anything else is throwing money away. The motivational experts will tell you to pay off the smallest balance first because you need a psychological win. But if you have ever actually tried to dig your way out of multiple debt balances, you already know that neither of those textbook answers fully captures the reality of your life. The problem with the math-only approach is that it assumes you are a robot with a perfectly stable income and no unexpected expenses. The problem with the psychology-only approach is that it treats you like a toddler who needs a gold star to keep going, even if it costs you thousands of dollars in interest. Debt is not just a mathematical equation, and it is not just a psychological game. Debt is a structural claim on your future labor. It dictates how much risk you can take, what jobs you can leave, and how vulnerable you are to an economic shock. To figure out which debt you should actually pay off first, we have to look past the interest rates and the balances and look directly at what debt is actually doing to your monthly survival margin. The illusion of the perfect spreadsheet. Let's start by looking at what you are supposed to do. In personal finance, the standard gold star method is called the debt avalanche. The rule is simple. You list your debts from the highest interest rate to the lowest, and you throw every extra dollar at the highest rate until it is gone. Mathematically, this is flawless. If you have a $10,000 credit card balance at 24% interest and a $10,000 car loan at 7% interest, putting your extra money toward the 24% debt will save you the most money over the lifespan of the loans. Every dollar that goes toward the credit card saves you 24 cents a year in interest. Every dollar toward the car only saves you 7 cents. When you plug this into a debt payoff calculator, the avalanche method always wins. It results in the lowest total cost and the fastest ultimate payoff date. But here's what the spreadsheet leaves out. The spreadsheet assumes the next 3 years of your life will happen in a vacuum. It assumes your income will never drop. It assumes your transmission won't blow. It assumes your rent won't increase, your dog won't swallow a sock, and you won't experience a sudden medical emergency. When you aggressively pay down a massive high-interest balance over 2 or 3 years, you are tying up all your available liquidity in a slow, grinding process. You might spend 14 months throwing every spare $100 at a $15,000 credit card debt. At the end of those 14 months, the balance is lower, and you have saved some hypothetical future interest. But your required minimum monthly payment on that card hasn't dropped much. If you lose your job in month 15, the bank does not care that you paid extra last year. They still demand their minimum payment this month. The mathematical optimization works perfectly, right up until reality punches a hole in your income stream. The momentum trap. Because the strict mathematical approach is so grueling, the secondary advice you usually hear is the debt snowball. You ignore the interest rates entirely. You list your debts from the smallest total balance to the largest. If you owe $1,000 on a medical bill, $5,000 on a credit card, and $15,000 on a car, you attack the $1,000 medical bill first, even if it has 0% interest and the credit card is at 25%. The logic here is entirely behavioral. Personal finance is 80% behavior and 20% head knowledge. By knocking out the smallest debt quickly, you get a rush of dopamine, you feel a sense of progress, you cross a line item off your list, and that motivation sustains you for the long haul. For many people, this is exactly what they need to stop ignoring their statements and start fighting back. But the snowball method has a massive blind spot. It entirely ignores the toxicity of predatory interest. If your smallest balance is a low-interest student loan, but your second debt is a credit card compounding at 29%, ignoring that credit card is financially destructive. High-interest revolving debt doesn't just cost you money, it actively accelerates away from you. The compounding interest outpaces your minimum payments. Telling someone to ignore a 29% credit card because they need to pay off a 4% personal loan for the psychological win is like telling someone to put out a small trash can fire while their roof is burning down simply because the trash can is closer. The real metric: monthly cash flow and vulnerability. If the math-only approach makes you vulnerable to life emergencies and the psychology-only approach ignores toxic interest rates, what is the actual framework for deciding which debt to attack first? To answer this, we need to change how we measure the danger of debt. When we look at our debts, we usually fixate on two numbers: the total balance and the interest rate. But those aren't the numbers that actually cause bankruptcy, and they aren't the numbers that cause you to lie awake at night. The number that threatens your survival is your minimum monthly required payment. Debt is, fundamentally, a fixed cost that reduces your flexibility. Every month, before you buy groceries, before you pay for gas, a slice of your paycheck is already spoken for. The higher your required minimum payments across all your debts, the higher your baseline cost of living. And the higher your baseline cost of living, the more catastrophic a loss of income becomes. Therefore, the most strategic way to pay off debt is not just to minimize interest and not just to cross items off a list. It is to strategically buy back your monthly cash flow. Let's look at a realistic scenario to see how this changes your decisions. Imagine you have a $3,000 bonus or a tax refund, or you sold a car and you want to use this lump sum to pay down debt. You have two debts. Debt A: a credit card. The balance is $12,000. The interest rate is 24%. The minimum monthly payment is $300. Debt B: a personal loan. The balance is exactly $3,000. The interest rate is 10%. The minimum monthly payment is $350. If you ask the math, the avalanche, it says put the $3,000 toward the credit card. It is the highest interest rate. If you do that, your credit card balance drops from $12,000 to $9,000. You save a lot of future interest. But what happens to your life next month? Your minimum payment on the credit card might drop by a few dollars, but basically, you still owe $300 to the card, and you still owe $350 to the personal loan. Your monthly obligations haven't changed. You are just as vulnerable to a job loss today as you were yesterday. Now, let's look at the cash flow approach. If you take that $3,000 and completely pay off the personal loan, you eliminate a 10% debt. The math nerds will yell at you because you left the 24% debt alone. But look at what just happened to your life. Next month, you no longer have a $350 payment. You have instantly freed up $350 of pure monthly cash flow. If your hours get cut at work next week, you need $350 less to survive. If you have an emergency, you have $350 of breathing room. And if things stay stable, you can take that freed up $350 and add it to the $300 you are already paying on the credit card, creating a $650 monthly weapon to attack the high-interest debt. This is the cognitive upgrade. You should prioritize paying off the debt that releases the largest amount of required monthly cash flow for the smallest capital requirement. You are not just paying off capital, you are buying back your monthly oxygen. How to execute this in real life? Once you stop viewing debt as a math problem and start viewing it as a cash flow and risk management problem, the order in which you should pay off your debts becomes much clearer. Here is how you actually build your priority list step by step. 1. Establish the buffer first. Before you pay an extra cent toward any debt, you must have a baseline emergency fund. Not a fully funded 6-month safety net, that comes later, but a cash buffer. For most people, this is between $1,500 and $3,000, or 1 month of bare-bones living expenses. If you aggressively pay down your credit card, but you have zero cash in the bank, what happens when your car needs a $900 repair? You have to put it right back on the credit card. You lose your progress, you feel defeated, and the cycle continues. Cash savings insulate your debt payoff strategy from everyday reality. 2. Kill the toxic debt. There is a category of debt that defies all strategic nuance Because it is mathematically fatal. I am talking about payday loans, title loans, and credit cards with penalty interest rates pushing 30% or higher. If you have a debt with an interest rate above 20%, it is a financial emergency. The interest is compounding so violently that any delay is effectively destroying your future wealth. If you have toxic debt, it goes to the top of the list, regardless of the balance size or the cash flow index. You have to stop the bleeding before you can manage the recovery. 3. Optimize for cash flow. Once the toxic debt is gone, or if all your high-interest debts are hovering in the same general range, say multiple cards between 16% and 21%, you switch to the cash flow index. You look at your remaining debts and ask, which of these balances is relatively small but is forcing me to pay a disproportionately high minimum payment every month? Car loans are notorious for this. You might only owe $4,000 on your car, but your required payment is $450 a month. That $450 is a massive rock sitting on your budget. If you knock out that $4,000 balance, you immediately gain $450 in monthly agility. Conversely, you might owe $30,000 in federal student loans, but your income-driven minimum payment is only $150 a month. Even though the balance is huge, the monthly cash flow burden is low. Throwing your extra cash at a $30,000 balance just to reduce it to $28,000 does nothing to change your daily life, and it traps your capital where you can't access it. You want to target the debts that give you the biggest return on monthly cash flow. Every time you eliminate a required payment, your household becomes harder to bankrupt. 4. The long tail. Once you have cleared out the toxic interest rates and eliminated the debts that were choking your monthly cash flow, you are left with the long tail of debt. This usually looks like lower interest student loans, a reasonable auto loan, or a mortgage. These debts have single-digit interest rates and manageable payments. At this stage, the urgency changes. The house is no longer on fire. You have breathing room. Now, the math finally matters. Because your cash flow is protected, you can afford to be patient and direct your extra capital toward the highest interest rate among the remaining debts, allowing the math to save you money over time. Or, frankly, at this stage, you might decide not to aggressively pay them off at all. If you have a 4% student loan and you have an opportunity to invest in a retirement account yielding an average of 8%, the math strongly suggests you should pay the minimum on the debt and invest the difference. But you can only make that choice safely because you already bought back your cash flow. The true cost of debt. When you are sitting at the table looking at all those balances, the anxiety you feel isn't just because the numbers are big. The anxiety comes from a loss of control. Debt forces you to work for the past instead of building for the future. It forces you to stay in a job you hate because you have bills that cannot be paused. It turns minor inconveniences, a broken appliance, a dental bill, into full-blown crises. The financial industry wants you to view debt strictly in terms of APRs and payoff dates, because that keeps you playing their game on their terms. They want you to lock your money into slow, mathematically optimal payoff plans that keep you making minimum payments across multiple accounts for years. But when you shift your focus from minimizing interest to maximizing your monthly cash flow, you take the power back. You realize that a $500 monthly payment eliminated is $500 of pure freedom. It is $500 that can be redirected to the next debt or put into savings or used to absorb an emergency without going back to the bank for another loan. The best debt to pay off first is not automatically the one with the highest interest rate, and it is not automatically the one with the smallest balance. The best debt to pay off first is the one that gives you back control over your next paycheck. Look at your list. Find the balance that is eating the largest percentage of your monthly income relative to its size and destroy it. I'd love to hear how this changes your approach. Look at your own debt spreadsheet and let me know in the comments. What is the one minimum payment that, if it disappeared tomorrow, would completely change your financial stress level? Let's talk about it down there. If this framework helped you see your money differently, make sure you are subscribed so we can keep building that clarity. I'll see you in the next one.